drinking, safe drinking water funding from a past proposition that was kind of lost under the rocks. So as we flip rocks over and try to look for any and all money that we potentially can put in play, we have an opportunity to again slide some additional resources, almost $4 million into that process. So as I know, the drinking water program's funding is starting to dwindle down as you all respond to those needs out there. I think we're working with your financial assistance staff to come in and work closely as we kind of continue that response effort statewide. One of the things, we have about 150 people or staff still in our Drought Management Operations Center. It includes conservation, groundwater, our state ops, delta barriers, those kinds of things. A lot of advanced planning is going on, and just recently with the Cal OES, we've set up what we call long-term advanced planning, which is kind of, you know, if things stay really dry, what are those kind of really big actions that we're going to need to make? And some of the lessons learned from Australia have been important for us to go back and go, wow, this is going to change maybe some policy and direction and really cause some stress. And so to the extent that we can get ahead of that, plan for that, and as an example, you know, as we monitor water trucking, questions are coming up, but where are they getting the water and how long will that source last? Right. And so when you start looking at larger communities trucking water for longer periods of time, that's going to become a bigger issue. And so to the extent that we know where the water sources are, that they're being properly managed, especially as we, if necessary, need to truck more water, we need to stay on top of that and communicate. And so obviously the department and the board need to work closely together, share information, and support our Cal OES emergency managers as we respond to those local issues. What I want to do, just closing, is maybe some challenges that I see coming up here on Drive 15 is, you know, kind of ground zero for us right now, at least from my perspective, is our smaller communities, our individuals. I was down in East Porterville on Friday morning, and that was a difficult situation. We're obviously working with the locals, emergency management, Cal OES, to kind of work through. They have a number of tanks sitting in front yards, and I think, again, if we go an extended amount of time, we have to change our response. We got to work with our local emergency agencies as well as Cal OES and others to address that issue. Conservation education, I already mentioned. I think, you know, we have what we have. I think Director McCowan's comments here recently is like, we really have to conserve every day. It's critical now throughout the state, not just, and I think that's a challenge for some people that look upstream and see a big lake that's only 30% of average or capacity. They think, well, there's water there. And I think it's that you can't assume that that's your water or that water's available to you. So I think we really have to work on our education conservation effort. Another thing is we have to provide, and we are, and I believe the board is, supporting our local drought task force. Right. I think a lot of the actions that are taking place are really done with the support of state agencies, providing that technical information and support and sometimes dollars to implement those local solutions. And I think they also own it, that solution versus the state coming in. Obviously, groundwater is a hot topic these days, and I think it's critical as we move forward under the California Water Action Plan, but also for drought. You know, where it is, where it isn't, and what can we do to get better data, especially on drawdown on our groundwater resources. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill. You always do a great job, and the state's lucky to have you out there, here and out there.
And he got his training at the water board.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Thank you. And nice to have you back.
Okay, next will be Les Gruber, and he'll be presenting some other guests from the Bureau and State DWI.
Great. Thank you.
That's good.
Good morning. I'm Les Grober, Assistant Deputy Director for Water Rights, and joined here today by John Lehi and Paul Fujitani from the Department of Water Resources and Bureau of Reclamation, respectively. And for this portion of the drought update, we're going to be focusing on the temporary urgency change petition for the operation of the SWP, the State Water Project, Central Valley Project, and Delta operations. So per the temporary urgency change petition adopted by this board about 2 weeks ago on September 24th, there's going to be now monthly reporting from the department and the Bureau just on the status of their operations, and particularly specific as to operations for protection of fish, but also other elements.
Great.
So there's a few things that are just bubbled up now that they're going to be reporting on. But before I turn it over to John and Paul, we have received last week a further request under that TUCP to make further modifications with regard to San Joaquin River pulse flows. We expect, and this is now going to be once again issued by the executive director back on that track. We expect that we will be issuing the order responding to that petition today. So with that, unless you have some questions specific for me at this time, I'll turn it over to John and Paul.
Are they going to tell us what's in the temporary urgency
Well,
change
I
petition
can.
or-
I'll go over that. What they basically have requested from the Bureau is to reduce the quantity of water released on the San Joaquin River side from about 1,000 CFS to 800 CFS. Those are for fish attraction flows, and to extend the time period, not just through the month of October, but to extend it into November. And this has been done in coordination with the fishery agencies. So based on the information before us, that was more optimal, is to both delay it and also reduce it. And the rationale for the reducing it is, again, to back up water and storage for all purposes.
Good morning, board members.
Good morning.
So Bill Croyle just is John Lehi with DWR, State Water Project Operations. So Bill Croyle just went through the numbers from last year. Fourth driest on the Sacramento Basin, second driest on the San Joaquin Basin. So, California hydrologies roll the dice every winter. That represents not much better than rolling snake eyes, essentially. And so that explains the extraordinary measures that occurred this year, including the TUCP petition and the resulting order. As we've reported to the board on a monthly basis, there has been savings up to close to 400,000 acre feet due to these modifications in the standards, and that's primarily due to operating to slightly lower outflow requirements and the movement of the Edmonton standard upstream to 3 Mile Slough. So those were the two primary sources of that savings that occurred since April, actually March was the first year we had, first month that we had some of those savings. Now, the last 2 months, there have not been, we've been operating pretty much to D1641 as far as outflow, so that's been August and September, and that's also past the irrigation season, so the Edmonton movement hasn't come into play. The end of that standard was the middle of August. So it's been primarily the outflow which we've been meeting. Now, as we're drying out here in the fall, we're actually cutting back our exports additional amount to actually produce larger outflow because we're more getting into salinity management type operations as we sit here today. And this is the normal course of operations as we go into the fall. It kind of transitions from outflow control to more additional outflow for salinity control. The one modified standard that's still in effect and could very well come into play this month will be the Real Vista flow standard. So it's entirely possible that we would be looking at a modification of that as per the order, the existing order, instead of a 3,000 monthly outflow to as low as 2,000 on the Real Vista flow. So that could possibly result in some additional savings upstream this month, but we will, of course, we'll be reporting on that early next month. So now we're taking a look forward as putting together this October contingency plan. At least initial look on it is that at least for the next 3-4 months, given the hydrologic scenarios that we're looking at, you know, we don't foresee at this time that we would be asking for any additional modifications to the standards, other than what Les just alluded to, the October pulse flow. But I think what's going to be important is looking at that very dry case. In the event that we do roll another snake eyes or something close to that through December, January period, I think it's going to be important that we highlight the potential trade-offs that could occur again, as we saw last winter, which essentially is between health and safety needs, real-time protections for fishery, upstream resources, diversions for migratory bird habitat, including rice decomp flooding, and water quality generally in the delta. So those will be the trade-offs I think that we will be trying to highlight in this this plan as part of that worst-case scenario, more along the lines of the 99% hydrology. So that's kind of generally where we're headed as far as that particular requirement. That's all I had.
The 400,000 in savings, that's a state project only?
No,
combined?
that is both projects. That's for both projects.
And is that 400,000 saved in storage, or is that split between exports and what got saved in storage?
It was primarily upstream storage. I think there is some of that was export. Yeah.
Busy work month. A lot of planning this month.
Yes, yes, a lot of planning.
Good morning. I'm Paul Fujitani with the Bureau of Reclamation in the Central Valley Operations Office. And I'll provide primarily an update on where we are in the CVP operations, where our current status is, and then I think, well, also provide an update on our temperature operations on the Sac River for the weather run. That was also included in the board order. So as has been mentioned in the past few speakers here, very low carryover storage. Within the Central Valley project, our carryover storage was about 3.1 million acre feet, and the only two lower years in that were 1977 and 1992. 1992 was real close. It's like 3.95 or something, but very similar carryover to this year. A lot of our reservoirs were generally at the end of September right around the 40 to 45% of average storage. I think that's generally what we see up and down the state too. So that's what we're starting out, going out into model year 2015. And this month, really what our focus is in our operations right now is trying to reduce our releases on our major reservoirs, while still meeting or trying to achieve some reasonable temperature operations in the rivers and still meet our delta inflow requirements and obligations there, water quality requirements in the delta. So that's really the highlighting what's happening on the American and Sacramento rivers right now. On Folsom, we're releasing about 1,050 CFS. We're trying to get down to a good stable flow that we can hold through the fall run spawning season, but still got to find that nice balance there between protection of the fall run and protecting our reservoir storage in Folsom itself. So we're holding right now about 1,050. Thinking that will probably continue probably into November, through November is what we're hoping to do right now. On the Sacramento River, we're currently at 5,000 CFS release, and that's one there too where our cold water pool in Shasta was really diminishing pretty rapidly. And ideally there, we'd like to cut further to conserve more cold water, but we're trying to balance that cold water conservation with water temperatures seen on the Sac River too. And also, what has happened on the Sac River recently is with the reduction in flows. We were at 6,000 in September. Reduction of flows from 5,000 to 6,000. There's a few late spawning winter run reds that were still in the river that were becoming exposed or partially dewatered in the process. So we really had to back off our reduction rates and provide time for the biologists to get out there and do monitoring and essentially knock down some of the size of reds a little bit to make sure that we don't dewater those reds. There's probably still 6 or 7 of concern in the river there, and we're going to hold 5,000 right now until hopefully those fry can get out of the egg spawn and fry can get out of the reds before we get down further. And our goal is to get down to 3,250 as soon as we can and try to get the stable flow there for the fall run before they start spawning too heavily. And that's all being done right now with really the delta inflow is getting pretty meager again. We're running at about 6,500, 6,800 CFS right now at Freeport. And with that, we're trying to maintain our water quality. We have seen some recent jumps in water quality in some of the stations there. And really the only knob we have left to turn right now is the exports. So both the state and us are ramping down to some fairly minimal exports. I think right now we are scheduled to actually start cycling our single unit at Jones Pumping Plant again, just trying to maintain the outflow that we believe we need to maintain water quality. Back to the Sacramento River temperature operations. Ideally, in most years, the goal is to have 56 degrees for winter run, spring run into fall run season. That's the upper range that the biologists would like to see. This year, with our cold water reserves running out, they're being depleted pretty rapidly. We're releasing upwards of about 60, 61 degrees out of Shasta right now. And that's a combination of the water coming through the temperature control device through the power plant and a couple thousand, about 2,000, 2,500 CFS coming through a low-level bypass at Shasta. The bypass temperatures are probably running in the upper 55 degrees. So we have that coming out of Shasta. Keswick is releasing water at about 61 degrees already. And our compliance point, the point where we're trying to maintain more temperature control, and it's a point where so far all of the observed winter run reds have been above. That compliance point is running about 62 degrees the past couple days. And we're seeing probably a climb of 10th or 2 each day at all of these stations. Waiting for the Mother Nature to take over and get some more cooling in the river. It's starting to flatten out more now, but usually we don't see that until towards the end of October. In addition to our bypass operations at Shasta, we are bypassing 100% of our releases out of Trinity Dam to get to the cold water reserves there also. We're looking at the temperature profiles at Trinity, and we believe we have adequate reserves there to carry us through October before the natural cooling will take over. So we're watching that very close to make sure we don't deplete that reserve in Trinity. We're pulling over about 500 CFS of the Trinity River water to the Sac River side to help maintain or help cool, or maybe less warm water down the Sacramento River water. So that's also we're using that to try to improve the temperature conditions on the Sac River side. And I think that's basically in a nutshell what we're doing there as far as our temperature operations. Oh, one other thing that we are working with the fishery agencies on, actually it's both at Nimbus and at Livingston Stone fish hatchery operations on the Sacramento River. But we're working with the fishery agencies to provide and install some chillers to chill the water going into the fish hatcheries so they can improve their conditions there. So I know that they're set up at Livingston Stone now to utilize the chillers. I don't know if they're actually in operations or not yet. I believe they might be with the temperature water we're seeing.
Thank you. I know a lot of extraordinary efforts are happening. We should probably do some sort of a presentation on fish rescues and all those different things that are going on. That'd be a good one to do for the next drought update. You all are definitely juggling catastrophes here, so.
Are you working, Paul, are you working with your Colorado River or Colorado State scientists who are your climate gurus in the Bureau? Because they have done a tremendous job of helping Southern California anticipate what might be coming down the pike over a number of years, and really are among the best. And it seems like we need to be using them up here as well?
Yeah, not so much our office. We're focused more on real-time or maybe annual kind of operations, but certainly within the region and our planning operations, planning division, we've been working very closely with the climate change modelers and specialists over at the Technical Service Center in Denver. I think, in fact, I'll be on a conference call this afternoon to talk about how to incorporate climate change into different studies.
We might add that to the list of things, of reports that we would like to be getting in the next few months
And
as
they,
to
they
what
recently released a report, right?
they have. They are able to narrow their focus on a region, sub-state. They did the Santa Ana area, so they can look at a very small section. So, anyway, I think it'd be interesting to have what they are seeing for the future, that as to what we should be planning for.
I have some questions about monitoring. Thank you for the report on the information on temperature. But do you have any information, or are the fishery agencies engaged in monitoring? This is unfortunately, it's a good opportunity to get some information about, just how much the fish can be stressed. At some point, it's going to be too hot. What is that point? Do you have information on monitoring?
Not a lot of the biological data. I do know that they are, well, I have all of the temperature data at compliance points, but as far as what's happened, happened physically within the river, I don't have that detailed report. I know that the winter run are starting to work their way downstream now, and they do have the counts that they take at Red Bluff and locations further downstream. Yeah, and then, like I reported, the winter run reds, we have seen, I think there's 7 that still of concern right now that have been observed that are potentially subject to dewatering. The movement downstream has been fairly flat this year. They haven't seen a spike like they would have normally seen yet. Not as much as they would hope to have seen at this point. And that's all I feel comfortable adding at this point on the fishery part of it.
Maybe
They are doing a lot of additional monitoring now further downstream the Sacramento River, and I think the Delta fishery monitoring has also been picking up. The Delta operations for salmonids and sturgeon group has reinitiated ended their summer vacation. They're meeting again now on a regular basis, as well as smelt working group, so they're all gearing up now. This is when things become more active for the fishery resources.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that maybe we could hear from the fishery agencies. It'd be helpful to know, I suspect, a decision has been made that this is an appropriate use of the resource, even at 61 or 60, as high as 62, that it's still worth it. And it would be, I'd be interested in hearing what went into that, what went into that analysis. Also, a question about the hatchery and chilling, and any information on the contrast once they get released. So if they're artificially being, chilled in one environment, and then they get released in into an environment which is higher temperatures than preferred, any monitoring on that situation as well?
The outcomes for many are expected not to be good, because, just to put in perspective, those temperatures, and correct me if I'm wrong, at 62 degrees for a sustained period, that starts being lethal to some of the fry and the egg. So we're really at the cusp now, and if the temperature just don't go down now naturally, we're using pretty much every measure to maintain the lower temperatures now. So we'll hope for cooler weather. to get us through the next couple of weeks. But we'll mention that at the next RT NOMP and provide more specific information in terms of the biological monitoring to see, well, what are the effects of these high temperatures now on winter run and spring and fall run.
Yeah,
So
just to
part
kind
the
of
thing
tease
for
it
the
out.
chillers is to give them a fighting chance, right? So that then you'll have more of them, so they have more of a shot of getting through?
And that's just to maintain it in the hatchery, so that presumably there, that will get them through this time period when there's not the naturally cool water. So by the time that they would be, released or,
They're bigger.
later on, they'll be bigger. Yes. But recall last year, and it's not just the temperatures, but because of the low flows, there was a lot of trucking, hauling,
Right.
because there were also not optimal conditions for the release. But the general word or thought is that this is, we're at risk now of losing this year class, for winter run and for fall run. So we don't yet know how bad it is.
Wow.
But getting back to the chilling on the hatcheries, so the idea is to and also hang on to them for a longer period of time so that they're released once the temperatures drop.
Well,
There
just to
wouldn't be
get
that
them through-
issue that I'm raising about a contrast.
Yes, well, in the moment now, just because they normally rely upon just the ambient temperatures that are in the river, then they would be even at risk of just not even being able to maintain the stock in the hatcheries. So by chilling them, it just will get them over this next few week period until naturally the temperatures drop.
Okay.
But we'll get some more specific information, and this could be perhaps also a subject of the next
that'd be great.
update. And we'll know more about how they have done, because this is really the critical period. Just one other thought in how all of this comes together. This is going to be the important learning opportunity now to see, well, how did this year close out? What have we observed? And it will help to inform decisions, tough decisions we're going to have to make next year when we get the contingency plan and other plans and say, well, do we want to make any adjustments to how we've operated or how we get through another dry year?
That's a good point, Les, in terms of, all the compromises that TUCP did this year. And I mean, it might be interesting to backcast a little about, what the temperature would be had we not made some adjustments along the way, to preserve temperature in the reservoirs. So, I mean, it's part of telling the story is that we took these risks. There were impacts to fish and temperature, but it could have been much worse had we not created some balancing. So it'll be good.
Exactly, and of course, everything is linked, but just that raw, that 400,000, absent that 400,000, if everything else had been the same and we had depleted the reservoirs that much more, there would be no ambiguity as to the condition of the fish.
Right.
Right. Hey, I appreciate the comprehensive report, and a lot went into that. Thank you, Paul and John. I was curious, you mentioned with the Trinity, a very difficult balancing act that we're trying to work together on, that 500 CFS is currently going into the Sac River to try to manage the winter run and the fall run issues and the flow to, outflow and everything else. But, about a month ago, there was a lot of interest and management measures taken to manage the Trinity itself. And so I was just curious if you wanted to speak to, the success or what's being learned in those efforts. What's the condition currently in the Trinity? Is it meeting its bypass requirements? Are temperature goals being met, or the flow pulse goals that were enacted last month being met? And how's that situation going with the Klamath management?
Let me think back now. We did release, I can't remember offhand now, was this 30,000 or 50,000 acre feet of additional flows down the Trinity River to help
Might be more.
help minimize the potential for a fish die off there. We did see some of the parasites that were spotted on some of the salmon in the Klamath River there. I just noticed ick, the same things you see in aquarium fish.
I know it's the same with the goldfish.
So-
Yeah.
We did release a good pulse flow. I can't even remember what the peak rate was now. And we probably didn't come down off of that until probably a couple weeks ago, that volume. And from what I understand, it did help out with the fish and achieve some of the results, but there's still, I think, seeing some lingering effects out there. The fish are still under some stress. We are bringing, like I said, about 500 CFS across right now from Trinity to Car Power Plant. But we're also drawing down Whiskeytown, part of our annual, call it wintertime, more flood type of operations. And we're utilizing that cold water out of Whiskeytown to help cool the river, Sacramento River also.
Okay.
But just within Trinity, we're still seeing a little bit higher temperatures than what the objective would be on the Trinity River also. Right now, the basin requirements would have us at 56, we'd like to have us be at 56 degrees at North Fork on the Trinity River. Right now, we're still running about 57 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, roughly 57, just dipped under 57.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time of year typically natural cooling takes over and it hits 56, usually within a week or two of the 1st of October, with things a little bit warmer this year. Hopefully I'll get down here before too long, get down under 56 there. That's one thing too, that the water we're bringing through Carr over the Sac Riverside actually helps cool the Trinity River further, because it brings water through Lewiston. It minimizes the residence time in Lewiston Reservoir, so we get cooler water flowing downstream by us bringing water through Carr Power Plant to the Sac Riverside. But then you get kind of the balance there is that we want to, it helps to increase flows, but we don't want to deplete our cold water that we have in Trinity either.
Right.
Because the way it's going right now, for all we know, it could be warm through October into November. So we're trying to carefully monitor that and meter that water out also.
Good. Oh, that's very well put.
So just to add or to punch, it's just those, it's all those complicated trade-offs, because that early release, you know, to prevent the fish disease problem at the mouth of the Trinity downstream really comes at the expense of maintaining that in storage for later cold water temperature control, both on the Trinity and the Sac.
Les, do you mind, for the next update, when we bring in the fish agencies, can you have them prepared, not just to update on how the year went and how it's going, but also give a, this is perilous, but to make it short, like a 101? Because I'm not, again, I'm always thinking of the people who are listening who aren't the expert public, so to speak, which is the difference between winter run, fall run, some of the trade-offs, the challenges in terms of what each of those runs needs, the spring flows versus the fall flows. If there's a short couple of slides to try and help set the stage for what they're looking at when they're looking at the fish flows, that might be helpful for folks.
Sure, so not just jumping into this year, but what in general.
Yeah,
So, the
but
full
not a
thing.
lot of slides, but just
Yep.
a little bit of a 101. That'd be
Okay.
helpful. Because there are some hard calls. You've got winter run, which is listed. You have fall run, which is the main commercial run. So stuff like that that people don't
Yep.
get.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you guys and continuing, arms locked together, marching through this and praying for rain while we do. Thanks. Okay, moving on to item number 7. Oh, good, Bill's still here. Hopefully you'll like this item.
And I think Max Gromberger will be making the presentation.
All right. Good morning, Chair Marcus, board members. I'm Max Gomberg, the board's climate change advisor. With me to my left is Rafael Maestu from the Office of Research Planning and Performance. To his left is Carlos Mejia from our Office of Chief Counsel. And behind us is Eric Oppenheimer, who's the director of the Office of Research Planning and Performance. So we're going to give our monthly update on the board's emergency urban water conservation regulation. This is our 3rd month of reporting, and we'll be discussing the trends, highlights, compliance, and the new reporting requirements, which will be kicking in this month. Can I have the clicker? So as I mentioned, we've got data now for the 3 of the summer months, June, July, and August, and the local water suppliers are implementing their water shortage contingency plans, and we'll be discussing that later in the presentation. As well, staff is beginning its compliance assessment activities, and we'll also get to that further on. So I'm going to now turn it over to Mr. Maestro to go through the actual numbers.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Rafael Maestro. I work in the Office of Research Plan and Performance. We're going to be presenting you the numbers that we received for the month of August. So we're still surveying 414 urban water suppliers, and we received 394 responses, which represent 33.5 million Californians. So we are now at a 95% response rate, which is excellent. And we are also collecting data from previous months. So we now also have 95% of responses from the month of July and 91% of responses from the month of June. So we now have data that we can compare.
Great.
So one of the questions that we ask is, are they implementing mandatory restrictions? And we receive that 318 of the suppliers, which represents 81%, they are imposing outdoor mandatory water restrictions. What we are not able to show yet is how effective those restrictions are on water use. But we expect that next month when we get the gallons per capita day, that we should be able to actually do a better analysis and evaluation on the effectiveness of those actions. So looking at the big numbers, so we have seen a reduction of 27 billion gallons in the month of August compared to 2013. That's approximately enough water for 500,000 people for a year. What is remarkable here, in my opinion, is now the data is more comparable, is that we use in August less water even than June.
Good. Good point.
And the trend is in the right direction.
Right. And July and August are usually the hottest months.
Correct. That's a good point. We are half degree hotter this year than it was last year. So even if it was warmer, we see a significant reduction. And it was even warmer in the northern regions than the southern regions. The southern regions were pretty much the same. So by looking at the data by region, we seen significant reductions in every one of the regions. All the regions have seen, savings in water. I want to highlight the South Coast because they went from 1.6% reduction to now a 7.8% reduction. And I also want to highlight the Sacramento region, who went from 19.5 to 22.6. But what is important is every one of the regions have safe water. When we look at water supplier, each water supplier individually, not all of them are saving water, and we are working with those who are not saving water to understand why they're actually using more water. So the overall message is positive. We are going in the right direction. We save 11.5% compared to last year. And we are encouraged by the conservation trend that we have seen since June 2014.
That looks good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm going to walk you through some of the noteworthy standouts for this month. Really want to note, the Sacramento region has done a tremendous job, and really want to give kudos to the leadership of the Regional Water Authority that's worked with staff here and with their members to really make sure that everyone's reporting and following the regulation, and so it shows. There's also been really good conservation throughout the San Joaquin Valley. The city of Tracy was a standout, as you can see. Really, their conservation percentage has shot up since June.
Do you know what that's from? Is that just from aggressive conservation or particularly aggressive rules or fear?
We're not entirely certain, but it could be a combination of all of those. We do know out in the desert, in the Colorado River region, the city of Brawley, you can see really high August number also, and that was partially due to a loss of one major industrial customer.
Yeah, I know that.
So, but again, still a very strong reduction, and they also, the city staff coordinated with us, making sure that they were following the regulation appropriately. Oops.
Oh.
So a few more. So in Southern California, the city of Long Beach is continuing to make conservation gains. They're up to almost 7% in August from about 4.5% in July. And this is despite having the lowest water use in the city of Long Beach since 1958, when there were many fewer people living there. So they're doing a tremendous job.
So this is to help make the point that there are some communities that have been saving for a long time, and so a 7% reduction is huge considering how low they already are. I guess San Francisco also. Impressive percentages considering how low their per capita water use already is.
Right, but it's important to note, too, that these are developed towns and cities. They aren't growing. So that's, we just have to keep that in
Oh
mind.
yeah,
as
that's
we-
another crosscut. Good
Yeah.
point.
That's a really
Another
good.
lens.
That's a really good point, and actually, we're going to discuss all of those factors in a little bit when we get to the gallons per capita per day calculus.
Good.
So just a few more on here. You can see Menlo Park has sort of catapulted into the top tier of Bay Area communities in terms of percent reductions for August. Santa Cruz is doing a tremendous job. People have already heard about this, but it's worth repeating. They have a very special or a unique system they use. They're already into water rationing, and what they do for people who exceed their ration amount and who incur penalties is they have an option to reduce those penalties by going to what they call water school, which is their version of traffic school, which is basically a water conservation class where you can learn all about both the measures you can take outdoors and indoors to reduce your water footprint. And you can see that they've posted 25+% reductions all the way through. So they're really doing well.
And their water school classes give great reviews at the end of the review saying how much they learned.
Yes. Yeah. People like them.
They do immediate checking, Tam. We like that.
And then finally, we have the city of Santa Rosa up in the North Bay, which you can see has doubled its conservation percentage from June to August. And they've made really good use of the SaveOurWater.org, SaveOurWater.com, excuse me, messaging that the state has put out. So we also have data from the Metropolitan Water District down in Southern California on turf removal, because this is one of the areas where we're really seeing some tremendous uptake from residents and businesses down there. So what you can see in that left-hand column down at the bottom is between all of their member agencies, commercial customers, residential customers, they've got over $81 million in rebates that have been requested.
Wow.
So that's turf removal plus other incentives. But Metropolitan at the beginning of the year bumped up their conservation budget from $20 million to $40 million. If they filled all of these, that's double the $40 million that they initially set aside. So that's really impressive. And you can see in that middle column, they're almost already up at $40 million that's already committed to these rebate programs.
So what that tells you is that Southern Californians are hungry for conservation help.
They're hungry for conservation help. They want to remake their landscapes. They want to take out the turf and put
And they
in
want to
other things.
quit mowing.
Absolutely.
That's really what it's about, you think?
Yeah.
All right.
And once we get them to quit leaf blowing too, then I would be satisfied.
Well, just as long as they don't leaf hose. Remember, can't do that.
So turning to compliance and enforcement matters, so as you saw in an earlier slide, we've got about 76 water suppliers that have indicated that they haven't instituted those mandatory restrictions on outdoor irrigation. So a couple of reasons why that might be the case is that they don't have that specific restriction in their plan, or they may have misinterpreted our requirements. We're going to be working with all of these suppliers to make sure that they are following the regulation, including through an enforcement process if it's necessary.
So you'll do sort of compliance assistance approach first and then escalate if need be.
That's
But
right.
compliance assistance is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we also, we imposed, the board imposed similar requirements on the smaller water systems. Those are the ones that serve fewer than 3,000 service connections. And so they had the option of either restricting outdoor irrigation to 2 days per week or something comparable. So we're looking at what are those comparable measures, and are they sufficient? And then, in addition, staff has continued to receive complaints and allegations of water waste from across the state. And so we are directing people who call us to their local water supplier, who should be, investigating and taking some action if it's a legitimate complaint. Also, the board now on its website has a water supplier lookup tool. So, for example, if someone on their drive to work is driving through, they don't know who the water supplier is, they can then go into our tool and figure out who it is and identify and call.
Bill, did you hear that?
That's good. So making it easier for them to figure out where to go, which is half the battle, is making it easier for people to go
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
to the right place. Great.
Right. So starting on October 15th, which is next week, for this next round of reporting, water suppliers are also going to be required to provide an estimate of residential gallons per capita per day. And so what we've done is we have provided a short guidance, which is up on our website. The link is there for water suppliers to make this estimate. And as part of making that estimate, there's a formula. It involves calculating service area population. And DWR has provided a sort of companion guidance for how to do that.
And that was important from our earlier discussions because water agency lines don't match census district boundaries, so it's actually easier said than done. So appreciate that they got that done.
Yeah, when you have a water district that overlaps multiple cities or multiple census districts, there's some complex mapping that's often involved to really get that
Or
estimate.
when you have
So
3 water districts in the same small city, just to pick one example.
that's also the case in some areas, yeah. So, we will be going over this again when we have the data next month, but these figures, the residential gallons per capita per day, are going to help us put the conservation figures in context, because they allow a supplier to track progress in their residential sector. And I want to stress this is just an estimate of gallons per capita per day in the residential sector. However, we want to caution about making comparisons across water suppliers for these numbers. As you can see, every water supplier has different factors. And those that are listed under that top bullet are all factors that influence this metric. And so, it's important to account for all of these when you're assessing gallons per capita per day. In addition, then you've got the bullets below. Those are some of the challenges that go into coming up with a good estimate. So, some water suppliers only bill every other month, so they'll have a period that doesn't track exactly with when we're asking for the reporting. We've addressed this in our guidance. And of course, others don't have meters, so that makes it more difficult to estimate the percentage of water use that is residential as opposed to other customer classes. Population, we already mentioned, is complex. And then one other wrinkle to this is, we've been asking for production figures. Water production figures are what goes into a utilities distribution system, and that includes what's referred to as non-revenue water. That's all the water that doesn't wind up being billed. And so there are various categories that go into that. It can be fire flows. It can be water that the utility uses to flush out its system. It can be leaks, and it can be inaccurate meter reads. So some water suppliers are opting to take that out and then use the billing data, if they have it, to calculate their gallons per capita per day. And that, of course, will result in a lower number for gallons per capita per day than if you had it in. Both methods are valid, but it's important to to account for that when we look at the numbers. And so we're going to do that. And I see board members Spivey shaking your head. We are going to try to account for all these variables and make sure that this story, which is an important one, is being told in a way that is not confusing and doesn't result in inappropriate comparisons.
That's right, and the goal is to not make the perfect the enemy of the good, but to give a fairer representation of how communities in a given climate are doing compared to other communities, because people want to know. Just one of those things, and so that we're not just looking at the percentage reduction, we're actually able to compare, if not apples to apples, apples to pear apples or something.
Right. But again, the best way to use this is by comparing within a community.
Correct.
Is the practice.
Absolutely.
Because unless, community A is right next door to community B and everything on there is the same,
Right.
it's really not an apt
So
comparison.
it's another set of data points. It's not, none of this is a perfect formula.
That's right.
And I was just in at this planning meeting yesterday, and Joe Grindstaff from Inland Empire Utilities Agency said, as part of his internal goal setting, he was using per capita numbers internally to say, I want to go from where we are now down to 150, which I think is absolutely fabulous. And then he has something that he can work with within his service area to use. And so I think in terms of highlighting people who are using per capita numbers over the next 6 months, highlighting agencies that are using it in a way appropriately,
No, that's a good point.
so that people can be encouraged to use it as a goal setting activity.
That's a really good point.
Good.
So finally, going forward, we're going to be analyzing these estimates when they come in next week. We're going to be, doing our compliance activities and continuing to highlight the many noteworthy conservation efforts that are taking place across the state. And just one addendum, which goes back to the earlier part of the meeting to Board Member Moore's report. This is a separate subject, but he mentioned Renew It. Renew It stands for Renewing Our Nation's Urban Water Infrastructure. It's a collaboration between 4 universities, Stanford, University of California at Berkeley, New Mexico State, and the Colorado School of Mines. It's funded by the National Science Foundation. And they've got a tremendous amount of really exciting research that's going on. And the Water Board is actually a partner to Renew It, and we are actually funding a couple of graduate students doing work that overlaps with our work in recycled water and actually water loss. So it's a great program.
Great.
Anyhow, so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and thanks for doing this, and thanks for highlighting just some. I know you could have highlighted 10, 20, 30 more, but thanks for highlighting some of the success stories, which aren't readily discernible just by looking at a percentage reduction, but understanding the whole story. I think that's important. I mean, on balance, the trend here is very good, so it's very encouraging. I know we'll remain vigilant and continue to ask folks to do more, but for now it appears the audience is listening, and folks have shifted into gear since we took action, which is always a nice thing to see and really encouraging. One thing I wanted to do was to remind people, again, for the folks who are just tuning in for the first time, why we're doing this. And we're doing this because of some of the things that Bill and John and others